Hello, R users. I'm just cleaning up here. It's really hot in Minneapolis and my water is sweating, so I have water stains on my nice desk here. Hello, my name is John Kulas. I'm a 20-year professor of industrial and organizational psychology, 12 years of R for normal, boring, statistical and analytical operations. But for the last 9 or 10 years, for the majority of the time I've been using R, I've also been crafting entire documents and projects from within the same environment that I specify in my R analyses. And so I'm here every week. I want to be a live resource to people. If there's anyone out there that's interested in this and maybe you just want someone to bounce some ideas off of, I'm here for that. I hang out for about an hour. We use the metaphor of an academic office hour. So the concept is if you're interested in this and have a question, feel free to ask in the comments. I've also been posting on X, so if you have a question or a request for something to be covered, you can post that on X as well. Something just came up tonight, actually, as I was getting ready to launch tonight's live stream, and I post on X as well. I try to capture some people there, so I say, "Hey, we got this thing going on. Come on over." And there's a new coding agent that X is launching, and so we might check that out tonight. It wasn't on the schedule, but we might actually check that out. That's okay. Initially, when I put these weekly sessions together, my intent was to not really have a theme each week, but eventually I would like to get a community of people together such that we can ask questions and have kind of an open forum. And this is consistent with that. The kind of the just finding out last minute that there's a new coding agent that might be available to all of us. That is definitely something that I want to have the flexibility to kind of pivot and switch to that on these weekly sessions. Absent that, what we've been doing is we've been checking out a kind of a just specialized or focused feature of these capabilities. And when I say these capabilities, what I mean is the software or the packages that facilitate us or make it possible for us to craft things like papers and slide presentations and websites and books, all from within the same environment that many people just associate with analytical stuff. So your analyses. Weekly here, we're taking a broader perspective, and we're presenting this and checking out the capabilities that aren't necessarily quantitative or analytically focused, but those features that permit the creation of documents. So there's a link in the comments to this week's slides. Please use them. I have fun putting them together, but it's more fun if people use them. And there's links embedded throughout, the helpful links. For example, there's a link on the code appendices here on this page, and it'll take you to a GitHub repository that we're going to check out during the second half of tonight's session. There's also, I keep doing it, but there's a tutorial there as well. If you stumble across this and you're like, what are you talking about? Make a document. Well, there's a walkthrough that we have put together, and it's also in the comments, and it builds a technical report for you, and the contents of it are specific to stuff that I do, but you can swap out whatever you're interested in quite easily in that template. And so all you need for that is Quarto, and Quarto is the piece of software that really kind of have been impressed with, that is the engine that creates the slides that you're looking at here with Mr. Marvin Martian playing an accordion on a little bit of rock that looks like maybe it was blowing up. I suspect it was either Daffy Duck or Duck Dodgers in the 25th and a half century or Bugs Bunny, because those are the two that tend to pull a fast one over on our good friend Marv the Martian. Okay, so because we check out these features in this kind of exploratory, open-ended, unscripted manner, each week we also, before we get into the current week's topic, we will take a look at what happened last week, and we'll try to present that in a format that's maybe a little more easily digestible in terms of learning. So can't just jump right into it. We need a transition. So let's get a transition here. Mr. Bullwinkle J. Moose.
Well, the Frostbite Falls daily paper, the Picayune Intelligence, really started something when it buried a pot containing $1 million in Confederate money. As a sales booster, the idea was a smash. People stood in lines to get the latest edition with clues as to where the pot could be found. But it wasn't a very good idea for the town, for treasure hunters had soon dug Frostbite Falls full of deep holes and tunnels. Of course, nobody minded when the statue of General Bumble fell from sight, or when a string of light poles suddenly dropped 10 feet.
Makes the light better for reading.
But they began to change their minds when a whole housing tract called Mountain View Homes sank to roof level. But the citizens really got up in arms when the crumbling surface began to affect the baseball scores.
Strike!
But that pitch was on the ground, Dump.
I don't care. It came across right at your belt buckle.
Soon an angry crowd collected at the newspaper office demanding the pot be dug up and the contest called off.
So Frostbite Falls, I don't think they've ever really specified where. It's in Minnesota. So it's Springfield for years. The creators of The Simpsons, they wouldn't reveal where the fictional Springfield was, right? It was a big mystery. Well, Rocky and Bullwinkle, they came straight out from the very beginning and said Frostbite Falls is in Minnesota. I don't know that they ever really placed it geographically. I have a recollection of seeing it on a map, and it's very far north. I may be conflating that with a real city called International Falls. Anyway, this is all a long roundabout way of saying there's no frostbite here where I am in Minnesota right now. It was 90 something today. I think I got a little bit sunburn, maybe a little heat stroke, so maybe fun for you people. Maybe some kind of shenanigans that go on here.
What?
Shenanigans. I said it. Okay. So last week we took a look at a Quarto extension, and so Quarto is one path that you can take towards creating products like this. And Quarto is a piece of software that was developed and is supported by Posit, the company that brings us RStudio, the IDE that many of you are choosing to use. It's the IDE that I'm currently favoring as well. I tend to use it most commonly. But in addition to the base distribution of Quarto, there's a bunch of people working on the fringes and saying, hey, I think it'd be neat if it could do this. And so a lot of what we've done on these 133 now weeks, looking at using R to make documents, many of the topics that I choose are based on these people working at the edges, working on the fringes. And so the Quarto team has not only allowed this, but they encourage it, and they've made it easy. They've made it accessible. I guess I shouldn't say easy, but they've made it accessible for people to create their own extensions and introduce their own capabilities. And the way that we're engaging with most of these is through GitHub. And so the extension that we looked at last week is called Accordion, and Accordion permits interactivity on HTML product types, like what you're seeing here with the dog playing an accordion. I forgot what I used in there as a kind of hidden. We'll leave Mr. Doggy or Mrs. Doggy there open, I guess. But the accordion folding capability is shown here on the right in terms of there's a banner, and that banner can be expanded. You have all kinds of control over that, from the way in which the extension just works out of the box. You can make it such that the accordion is expanded when viewers first encounter it. You can, what else can you do? You can introduce tags, you can put images in there, you can do all kinds of content. So there's some capabilities that come built in just out of the box, but there's some other things that we can do with this as well that we'll see in just a second when we get to the tweaking phase. We spent quite a bit of time last week not just implementing the capability, but seeing if we can kind of enhance it a little bit. But the way that you access it, if you're interested in playing with this, and again, it works within other product types. So it works, we tested it as we usually do on these weekly sessions. Even though the products that we're engaging with, even though the capabilities that we're engaging with permit the production of all kinds of different document types, including, for example, Word documents, that's not something that really interests me personally. And so unless unless someone comes across on one of these weekly sessions and says, hey, why don't you do some word stuff, we can do that. But absent that, I probably won't be doing that. I don't know if there's more water on the inside of my mug or on the outside of my mug at this point. I do have my air conditioning on. It would be even worse if I didn't have. All right. Doggone clearing my throat again. Sorry about that. So the way in which you can access this capability is go ahead and navigate to the GitHub repository. There's a hyperlink here again on the slides. So the easiest way to do this is to access my slides. If you hit the GitHub repository hyperlink there, it'll take you to the GitHub page that hosts this capability. Now, you don't need to be a GitHub user. I am, so I love GitHub and I use it for most of what I do. But you don't need to have any familiarity with GitHub at all if you want to use this capability. It's just where the capability is hosted. And you can access it quite simply by copying this bit of code here. And you want to do this within your IDEs. Most of you are going to, as I already mentioned, probably be using RStudio. So within RStudio, you're going to want to paste that not in your R console, but in the terminal. In the terminal, you might not be able to have your shortcut keys in the terminal, so you might need to engage with your mouse and do a right click, but this is, you want to paste that command into a environment that looks like this. It doesn't need to be within RStudio, but RStudio does have a terminal pane, and that makes the accessing of capabilities like this pretty straightforward. So that's how you access it. Again, you don't need to know anything or do anything with GitHub. You just need this link, and this is the main thing you're getting from GitHub. If you want to know a little bit more about the capabilities and how to use it, it's beneficial to spend some time on that repository. But if you just want to have the capability, this is all you need. And with all of these extensions, we've learned over the course of a couple of years here is that with these enhanced capabilities that are accessible via Quarto extensions, you're going to want to implement those within a project directory. Now, more and more and more, even not outside of using GitHub as a way that I structure my work, I have started using project directories almost exclusively for everything I do. Sometimes on these weekly sessions we don't, but it obviates the kind of where is my stuff question, which again, I've mentioned this over the course of several weeks, but it was always one of the largest and earliest obstacles that my students had as they're trying to learn R. It's basic computer stuff. It's like, where is this stuff? So if you're operating within project directories, you don't have to worry about that, and that's just massively powerful. I do have a hyperlink here about kind of some benefits of using project directories and why you might want to use them as well, and how to use them as well from within RStudio. We'll do it tonight, so if you're not quite sure how to do that, we'll be walking through that process again tonight. Whew, doggone it. Okay, so that's how you access it. In terms of using it, there's two ways to use it that really mirror a lot of what we do crafting these documents. There's kind of an overall specification within each of these documents that's located in the YAML, the front matter, sometimes called metadata. Your YAML is identified. It'll be the first bit of information you see at the very top of your plain script specification. There's an opening fence of 3 dashes and a closing fence of 3 dashes. Historically, formatting within the YAML was really picky. Quarto's done a great job of kind of making things less picky. It's a lot more forgiving than it used to be. When I say forgiving, it makes me think of just...
What?
Vader is not as forgiving as... or the Emperor is not as forgiving as Vader is. But the YAML, however, is much more forgiving than it used to be. So the same content that we have here in this accordion on the lower right, where it says click here to view contents in the header, and then when you're accessing the accordion, the body of it just simply says this is the body content. There's two different ways you can specify it. One is within the YAML. Now, we didn't do this last week because this to me is going to get very unwieldy very quickly. And if you look at my slides have a lot of kind of goop on them. I have it. Maybe you don't notice it, but there's a washout in the middle. There's this funky kind of fonts that's being used. There's weird colors. There's shadowing. And so I do all of that because I have fun with it. But all of that, many of those things add to kind of just the sheer depth and breadth of my YAMLs. And so to the thought of adding this capability in that space just is something that doesn't appeal to me. If you do access my slides, you'll notice, for example, you can use your mouse wheel to navigate. That's a piece of information that's cluttering my YAML, but it's something that's really important in there, and I would prioritize that over something like an accordion specification. Now, this exact same content can be specified inline, and inline is going to be identified by this kind of short code specification. By short code, I'm talking about the syntactic structure. So the syntactic structure is shared here with other general shortcodes. We talked about shortcodes, I think, 2 or 3 weeks ago. Really, for me, informative session. So if you're interested in those, go take a look at that. Or again, just drop me a note and we can chat about them. But the shortcodes, as I'm talking about, are identified by this opening of 2 curly brackets and an angle bracket, and then a closing of the same characters but in reverse sequence. So angle bracket, curly bracket, and the capability here is called out, and this is standard shortcode convention. The capability is called out first, and then kind of some modifiers or content associated with that, values associated with that capability come afterwards. And so you can see here what's in the YAML on line 3. We're saying, hey, this is a capability that I want to play with, but it's coming from this extension called accordion. The same thing is happening here. And then the content you see, there's in the inline specification, there's just a little different structure in terms of using equal signs instead of colons. Otherwise, the content is the same. The one piece of information that's, I guess, a little importantly different across these 2 specifications, and I'm talking about lines 4 through 8 here and lines 2 through 5 here. The one thing that's a little different is the label. So within the inline specification, you're not going to specify a label. The reason you're using a label in the YAML specification is so when you engage with the shortcode, you don't have to clutter your shortcode with a lot of content here. You can just call up the label. And theoretically, you're going to have multiple labels in your YAML for multiple accordions. I would rather just structure it this way and keep my YAML kind of uncluttered. Okay, so that's how you implement them. There's 2 different ways. You can do it in the beginning of your document, keep everything together, and then once you get to the point in your document where you want to call it out, you can just kind of have a shorter convention in terms of calling it out, or you can have a less condensed shortcode specification, and that's what the accordion authors referred to as inline specification of that capability. And then in terms of styling, so we played a little bit with different ways to style those. I have nothing against the way that these come in styled. So there's some default specifications here that I'm just going to click through this a couple times. Hopefully I don't give anyone vertigo or anything. Hopefully everyone took their Dramamine. That's generally true of these weekly sessions. Take your Dramamine before you hop onto YouTube. It's generally good as I go back and forth over capabilities like this. But you'll see a slight difference here. There's kind of a powder blue background when the content is presented, when it's enabled or when it's shown, and then the text itself switches colors as well. So the font switches to a blue, and so there's just it's subtle, but it's nice. But there may be circumstances in which you want to change that. And we're already 20 minutes in, so I'm not going to spend a ton of time on this. But there is a specification on the on the capability site itself, and there's a hyperlink here. If you want to get a sense of how you might be able to target the accordion to affect the way in which it's displayed and the way in which it does display, you can check out the CSS styling page here on the help page for the accordion extension itself. And then we went to Grok. Grok is kind of my go-to right now first attempt at AI help with doing things like scripting and coding. And we just told Grok, hey, I want to change maybe some colors, and not only colors, but I want to specify when the accordion has been activated versus when it's just sitting there kind of on its own. And so we didn't have to do any inspection of an HTML element ourselves. Grok was able, just from the help pages, to identify the targets for the CSS. So the elements of the HTML elements to target that are going to affect the things that we want to affect. So, and we just played with color, background color, and text color as well. And there's a lot more that you could do, but that was sufficient for us in terms of the amount of time we had last week on that capability. You're just kind of going back and forth between open and close, open and closed, open and closed. Okay, so those are accordions, and accordions are fun. As I said, I alluded to, I don't know if I spent a lot of time talking about it, but we tried out that capability within PDF and typist documents as well. And it works just fine. It's just, you're going to lose the interactivity, so it's going to look a little silly, I guess. It might look more like a call out, like a Quarto call out. And those Quarto callouts, since we started using them, I've been seeing them in other applications as well. So I don't know where that originally comes from. A lot of the stylings that we see with some of these with many of these capabilities have a bootstrap kind of origin to them. So I wouldn't be surprised if that's where callouts come from. But the accordions within non-dynamic document types are going to, in my opinion, end up looking a lot like a callout. So you might just want to use a callout in those applications. Okay, so or not. If you want to use an accordion, go ahead and use an accordion. So today we're gonna check out another extension, and that extension, I had thought about checking this out a couple of times, and honestly, I don't remember why we didn't. But we're gonna check out a couple of different ways to append the code of your document at the very end of your document. So a couple of different ways to throw them into appendices, and there is an existing capability here that works with the old way of structuring these documents. And the old way of structuring these documents rests upon packages, R packages, and collectively those packages are just identified as what are called RMarkdown. The files that we're going to be scripting in, they have an extension that ends in the letters RMD, and there is a way to do this, specify your code, put into an appendix or elsewhere, honestly. So put somewhere within your document. We can do that within Markdown, so we'll check that out. And then also Quarto, this kind of newer piece of software that is a one-stop shop for creating publication-ready documents. There's a different way to do this within Quarto, and that's engaging with an extension, and so I think we'll try that. So we'll do the Markdown method, and then we'll also try the Quarto method with an extension. And what the heck, we might as well try the Markdown method in a Quarto document. The reason I mentioned RMDs as a file extension type on Markdown documents is because the Quarto document extension is just QMD. So QMD, RMD, QMD, RMD. It's R Markdown or Quarto Markdown. And so those are the file types that we're going to be playing with. So let me leave poor Scooby there. He's got a tummy ache. It's actually an appendicitis, I would imagine. since we're talking about appendices, that's probably an appendicitis that he's dealing with. So I feel kind of bad just leaving this open with him, you know, feeling like that. But he's a bit of a glutton anyway, so probably had it coming, having a tummy ache like that. I shouldn't feel too sorry for old Scoob there. Okay, so let's open up our. I guess I already have it open. Oh, I have it open because I was showing you a terminal. Let's do a new file. I'm going to do a markdown file, and we'll just accept the default kind of content there. That's fine. I don't need to be in a project directory for this. I haven't played with Markdown. I have, but in terms of creating something from scratch, I haven't created something from scratch within Markdown using a Markdown document for quite some time. So one of the differences you'll see here is the option to go from your plain text specification to a nice document that you can share with somebody. In Quarto documents, that the process of going from your plain text specification to your end product is called rendering. Here within our Markdown file, it's called knitting. And knit is the engine that kind of powers traditionally the weaving the weaving of your narration and the prose that you write with the actual analyses that you have. So here's our document. Why does that look so terrible? I guess I had my zoom set really small. I don't remember doing that, but that makes sense. So here's an HTML product type, and this is just boilerplate off of, this is what RStudio gives you for just kind of a page that you can take and tweak to your own desire, to your own, however you want to use it. Now, the way in which we set global commands regarding how script should be processed is a little different in Markdown files than it is in Quarto files. So in Quarto files, if I want to affect something globally, I'll use an execute command in the YAML, and then I will specify my echo and my messages and whatever else I want to specify. I'll do it up here. By tradition in these Markdown files, if you want to have a global, if you wanted to have broad, if you want to set the way in which your document interacts with chunks, specifically code chunks, you'll do that within a chunk itself. So not in the YAML, but within a chunk. This name is kind of a good way to, it's a good way to structure your chunks, but there's no meaning to it. So just because it's called setup doesn't mean that this chunk is being interpreted any differently than any other chunk. But really, what we want to take a look at here is this options chunk function from the knitter package itself. And this is where we can say, hey, I don't want anything to be echoed. I don't want any messaging. And I don't want any warnings. And those are kind of the big three that if you're using these processes a lot, those are the big three that you're probably going to want to at least be aware of as you're creating documents. These the echoing of code and the presentation of messages and warnings, those are generally good for you for feedback, but when you're creating your final report, you probably don't want them interspersed in your report. Now you may want them to be available, which is germane to what we're talking about tonight. So I'm just going to ignore that, and so we don't need to set global. We don't need to have any global settings for tonight. And we have two code chunks here. Let's add a third one. Let's add a third kind of bigger one. So let's do something fun. That plot doesn't really appeal to me that much. Let's get a ggplot in here. And we'll just find one that looks pretty. We'll put it in. What is this? Now, see, I'm drawn to these ones that just look crazy, and then there's probably going to be a lot of text here. So we'll see if, oh, it's using a package called GG pattern, which I'm pretty sure I don't have, but we'll check it out here. Yeah, I don't have GG pattern. Let's see if we can get it. So I'm going to see if I can install that. It is on Crayon, so that's good. Sometimes when you go through this process and find something that looks a little neat, you know, I didn't check the date on that, so it's possible it's from like 2016 or something, and then it's probably not going to work. Now, when you're operating from within these documents, a self-contained chunk like this, instead of knitting the entire document, you can always just interact with the chunk. There's a command, there's a play button up here that will run the whole chunk. You can just go line by line if you want. I like to use control return. Control return will just go line by line and run each of those. But it looks to me like it's going to work, so I'm going to go ahead and knit that. And what usually happens is the package tab in RStudio will get taken over by the viewer tab, and so we'll get to see what's going on there. Now you can see some of the warnings that we have here, and those are some of the chunk options that I usually override them, I guess. So I usually turn those off is a better way to put it. Sorry. I told you the heat got to me today. So if I rerun this, I'm expecting not to see these warnings. Now those warnings might also be technically not warnings. There might be something called a message, which is why I usually turn message off as well. But there we go, and those warnings are no longer there, and so you see that the chunk now, instead of being split up, is coming in as one big code chunk there. There's a code chunk for the plot, and there's a code chunk for the cars. Now this is the content that we're talking about adding to an appendix. So instead of having it kind of interspersed throughout my document, if you still want it to be accessible, if someone, for example, is going to look at if someone like a professor is going to be looking at your code, like this is a great way. Or if you're doing a tech report, I used to tell my students, if there's any students watching, they're probably going to roll their eyes right now, but when I would have them create tech reports, and I always would have in one class in particular, I'd always have my students make tech reports, and I swear I could have just had a recording of me saying this because I said it so often. But when they would ask, inevitably, should I put it in the report? Should I put it in the report? Should I put it in the report? My answer would always be, throw it in an appendix. So in a technical report, if you're on the fence, if you don't know if something should or shouldn't be in the report, just throw it in an appendix. I have technical reports that are hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of pages long. I think my biggest one was 700 or 800 pages, but there was only 20 or 30 pages of text in that, and the rest of it was appendices. So maybe I'm not the best person to be telling students to do this, but I do. I say throw it into an appendix. So that's what we're going to do tonight too. Let's see how to throw that content into an appendix. So there's a hyperlink on this week's slides and this isn't like anything else we do. This is not the only way to do this, but this is one way to do it. And so in my document, I can just, at the very end, use this rather empty code chunk. So it is a code chunk, but there's nothing in it. The important stuff in it here is in the code, is in the chunk specification itself. And so let's just run it and see what happens. So I don't have any echoing specified in any of these chunks, but the default looks like it's true. So I don't know, because I haven't done this for so long. I don't know if I first need to go into these chunks and set the chunk individually set the chunk specifications to echo as false? I don't know. It might be sufficient that we just have this right here. So let's knit it and see. Kula, stop blabbering, take a drink of water. Okay, so it does put it at the end, but it's also echoing it throughout, which you probably don't want to do. So we could have one of those global chunks that says, you know, I don't want anything to be echoed, or individually we can set that individually as well. And I'm just going to do it individually because I think we might want to do something else individually here as well to see kind of some of the neat aspects of this capability. Okay, so we have a much cleaner report now. There's no echoing throughout. That, you know, the speed and distance, I don't like that. That looks a little, so we don't need the summary. I'm going to put an eval false on this one, which means don't process this, because I don't like the way that looks. To me, that if we're trying to create a document where the technical stuff looks like it's appended at the end, this looks a little too technical for me. So I'm just gonna ignore that. But we should still see the code being echoed in the appendix, even though that output is now not going to be part of my document. Yeah, there it is. Now you're seeing the code all kind of slopped together, but there are commands here. Now we can separate it. There's all kinds of neat things that we can do to modify this content, but the fact that it just gets put in the appendix by itself is just, I don't know, it's great. It's awesome. Now this works. It doesn't matter what we're creating. We can do a PDF document using these using these more traditional ways of producing documents. The number of types of documents that we're generating, we're not going to have as many of them. There's my example right there with the appendix. And actually, the way in which the code looks in a PDF format, to me, looks a lot more just kind of visually appealing. I like that. And again, just going back and forth, switching between these different document types is so incredibly easy using these processes. If a professor said, give it to me in PDF, please, if it was a nice professor, he or she would say, please. But if they said, please give it to me in a different format, it's a really quick and easy way to do it. Okay, so one way to get your code into an appendix is to use this RMarkdown system, which is a code chunk specification. Now let's just do maybe one of these modifications if we can find it, and show you that you can really kind of control what gets put into that appendix pretty easily. There are, let me see. So there's ways to grab the labels. And then what I was looking for, here we go. I think this appendix equals true is what I was looking for. I'm going to paste it here and see. So instead of all labels, I shouldn't need echo true. I don't think I need those. But I have the same specification here, and in the all labels command, I can put some conditional statements. And so if I put appendix equals true, I believe what that's referring to is there's a chunk command that's appendix. And so there's only one chunk in this now specification of 3. So I have 3 different things that I'm asking R to do. Only one of those things am I saying this is stuff I want to put in the appendix, and then in my specification of what I want in the appendix, I now have modified it such that I say only put in if appendix equals. Now it's using the R conditional here, the two equal signs. But it's saying only if appendix equals true should that be reported. So if let me do it as an HTML again, just because that's a little quicker. But now, if this is operative, if it works, the only code chunk that should appear in that appendix is the code chunk for the I see. Oh, I see why it says eval. So interesting. What it's doing without eval is false. It's performing all of this. So the eval false. I'm glad we took a look at that. So the eval false is actually important. So it's not only duplicating your script, but it will also run your script. So that eval false is important if you're using the RMarkdown process. I don't recall that, but it's good. It's good to know. Okay, and yes, the appendix equals true is one way to control what actually goes in there. And so in this particular case, I just said this is the only one that I want. And again, if you're writing something like a tech report and you just get into the habit of putting this in your code chunk specifications, appendix equals true or false, it's a really easy way to kind of toggle, turn off and on what goes in there. And again, if you want labels, if you want to get a little more specific or elaborate with it, you certainly can. I don't think we're going to tonight unless I don't see any comments, so no one's jumping in to say, hey, Gulas, go ahead and do that. So we won't do that unless someone says that. Okay, so let's check out the kind of more modern way to have code put into an appendix. This one I have. So the old R Markdown process, many of those old R Markdown processes, looks like I'm gonna have to update that link. I don't know why that link is off, but I'll try to remember to update that for you if you're using the slides. Let's go ahead and do that right now because we're gonna have to switch into a project directory anyway. So I'll show you how I do that. I'm gonna look for that. I'll look for that bit of code, and then we'll create a new project directory. And my RStudio is a little slow. I have so many projects. I think that might have something to do with it. I don't know. It could have nothing to do with it. I don't know. But I would imagine it has something to do with it. So here's my hyperlink that was not working. Oh, I have two sets of parentheses, so that's kind of a rookie mistake there. It doesn't matter what platform you're using, the debugging process is kind of similar. You're going to look for spaces where they shouldn't be. You're going to look for periods where they shouldn't be, commas, colons, semicolons, and then double parentheses, things like that. Now, my files are also taking an incredibly long time to render, and that's because of the way that I host these files. So the way that I host them, yeah, no, that's working fine. I host these on GitHub, as we're talking about GitHub. I host them on GitHub, but in order to publish them so you have access to them, it's easiest to do that if I actually render, if I keep my QMDs in one spot and then I render the product to a different spot, and that disconnect during stream link fix, that disconnect between where I specify things and where I publish them to, that's what you're seeing with regard to the amount of time it takes for something to render on my local machine. Okay, but that link is now fixed. So let's engage with this extension. So this extension auto generates an appendix from code chunks in a Quarto document. Let's read a little bit about what it does because I haven't done a lot of that. moves the display of code chunks when echo equals true to an appendix. That's what we want. So so this is going to be a little different. So the R Markdown specification, if we did not want, I kind of like it better actually, because in the R Markdown specification, it's your choice. You can present something in the document or not, and it can still be at the end or not. This one looks to me like, well, let's see. This one looks to me like you're going to want to set echoes true, and then it's just going to append it at the back. This is nice. It works in all four main document types: PDF, typist, HTML, and then the bad one, the Word document. We're going to pretend like we didn't see that. It's saying why you might want to use it. Let's do an install here. Again, we're going to do an install into a project folder. Now, I have so many project folders. I'm going to use last week's accordion project folder just because I have way too many of them. So the easiest way to do this is to create a brand new project folder, but there's no reason I can't do it in this existing one too. You can see currently in this project directory, I do have an underscore extensions folder, but there's only one extension in it. It's called accordion. So I'm going to go to my terminal and I'm going to paste the Quarto command to access the extension. And again, you don't need to use GitHub to do this. You just need to know, I guess, that the capability is hosted or available on GitHub. Oops. When I talk and do this, I do this all the time. I say no when I mean yes. This is where I mean no. I don't want to view the documentation, even though I probably should view it because I have no idea. I really have no idea what we're doing here or how to use it. So let's see. Using it, simply do filters code appendix. Okay. Hey, look it. They're using accordion. I mean, it's code folding, but they're using code folding. So it looks like it's going to actually, how does that work? It looks to me like it's going to modify our plain text specification. If that's the case, oh no, okay. Whew. I was going to say, that's the first time I've seen that happen. What they're rather saying here is they're saying you could manually script it this way, or using the extension, it'll auto do that scripting. Okay, that makes a lot more sense to me. So let's create a new file, just like we did before. We'll do a Quarto document. And again, we'll just use default specifications here. We'll render that document. It should look very similar to the RMD default. There's different example code in there, so I don't have a plot anymore. I don't have the summary of the cars data set or empty cars data set, but I do have a code chunk there that's specified. And then I have one where echo is false. And when echo is true, I guess I can put echo true here. So echo true, I believe, is the default, so that's why it's not needed on this particular chunk. But there we see it's echoed, and then we see it's hidden, and we'll keep that hidden just because that's helpful, I think. As we get into the extension itself, let's look for another figure, maybe a nice plotly figure. Plotly figures are fun. I have a ton of fun with them. It's a great way of having some interactivity without needing leaflet maps as well. Leaflet maps and plotly objects are a great way to introduce an interactive element within your visual without needing any kind of server-side capabilities. I want to look for a chart that has some filtering on it just because that's more fun. There you go. There's a filterable chart. And what I mean by filterable is you can choose what to display, what not to display. It's a much larger code chunk, but that's okay. That'll be good for our appendix. So Plotly, I use Plotly all the time, so that should be installed. So we'll just run that chunk instead of, oh, we'll run the entire document instead of just running that chunk. And there is our Plotly object. Again, these warnings and messages, I am going to turn those off because that just gets annoying. We don't want that. So you can use the hash pipe, or you can use the same specification that we used in the RMarkdown documents as well. It's just you got to be aware of the equal sign versus the colon, and the upper and lower case might be consequential. And so the scripting convention is different across those two different ways of producing these documents. So there we go. We got rid of the messaging and the errors, which is what I wanted. And we do have a big echo here right on top of the impressive looking Plotly object. Poor Oceania. I didn't know there was an I on the end of that. I thought that was Oceania. But there's only a couple of countries. Let's just get Oceania only in there. There's only 2 countries. Oh, Australia and New Zealand. What am I thinking? I thought Oceania was something else. Anyway, that's not why we're here, is it? So we're here to actually play with, we're here to play with this capability. And so it's already in our project directory. So if I were to look through my files in the extensions folder, now I see that there's a second one, and that second one is for this code appendix capability. So I'm going to add a statement within my YAML, and that's this filters command. And the filters command is just saying, use the code appendix. Now, it looks to me like there's not a lot that we need to do other than just say that I want that extension to actually be in operation. So what we're looking to see is if the location of this and this moves to the very end of my document. Now it sounds like it's also going to give it a heading. I'm going to check how to specify table of contents within a HTML file because that's going to be a little easier for us to see if we do that. So TOC, is that just true? I'd like to see. It looks like it's probably just a Boolean true, but I don't recall off the top of my head. Many of the product types that I use, they have a default table of contents in there. There it is. Oh, and I did, okay. So I ran it with the filter enabled, and it did give us this other section here called code appendix. Code appendix sounds like something that you need treatment for. Now it is separating these. It's a little different. It's separating them with a space, and we didn't have a space separation using the default RMD process that we talked about. That couldn't be easier. So there's nothing up here now. It just puts it at the end. Again, if you're a student, if you're writing a tech report, this would be a very easy way to control how your code is reproduced and available for other people. So if I set this echo to true as well, it should put it in my appendix. It's now absent from the appendix. We'll add a little more here to make it a little, I guess, fancier. Apple is 2 times 2 apple, and then we'll do apple times 3. or Apple minus 3. Let's do that. So the expectation is if the old answer was 4, then the new answer will be 1, right? They didn't say there was going to be math on this session. Nobody said there was going to be math. I don't know why, but that's one of my now favorite kind of stupid sayings that happens in a lot of movies. It's just in popular culture. Nobody said there was going to be math. Okay, now one of the things I love about this is the clipboard is enabled. The clipboard is enabled with Quarto. Now that wasn't something that we had with the RMarkdown process. We had the code reproduced, but we didn't have the clipboard enabled by default. And these clipboards are really, really slick. They're really, really nice. If you're a professor and students do this and you want to recreate what they've done, you can't get it. Not saying professors are lazy, but if you're grading 20, 30 reports, there's not a quicker way to do it than to just use that clipboard and copy it straight over. So that's super cool. Let's see if we can get a PDF and maybe a typist. Now we're going to lose. So the bad thing about having a plotly object is that sometimes doesn't play nice with PDFs in particular. So I'm guessing we'll get something with typist, but we might not get anything with a PDF document. So I forgot that we have the table of contents in here. So the appendix is not included as a linkable table of contents section using the typist specification. So that's a little different. Here's just taking a screenshot of the plotly object, it looks like, which is great. I mean, that's nice. I've lost the clipboard capability. I mean, the content looks the same. This to me looks like it's not quite being recognized at the same level as these other headings, and the table of contents kind of reinforces that. Okay, so that to me is a little bit of a difference there. See if we can force a PDF. Now, the expectation is this is probably going to think a little longer. Ooh, something happened there. Just again because of that plotly object, and it might very well crash. Usually what Quarto will do is it will look for LaTeX packages that will help it, that will actually help it give you something. There we go. That wasn't bad at all. Yay, PDF. Quarto, I'm just so impressed with Quarto. Now we do get, so that's really surprising. That we are getting a linkable appendix with the traditional PDF. The format again is the wrapping is messed up. In an HTML document, we just get a scroll bar instead of the mapping. We'd maybe want to try to play with that a little bit, but that's something that it kind of has always been. This is not surprising. So this is something that is not at all surprising to see. And we've lost the clipboard again, but that's not surprising. The format, it looks great. The screenshot again looks really nice. It looks like we're a little further away here on the screenshot. I don't, who knows why, but it renders just fine. So this is fantastic. I think one last thing, let's do, just out of my curiosity, I want to see if we can use the RMarkdown code chunk specification to get our appendices, or to get our code put into an appendix, not using the filter. And so we're gonna revisit the RMD specification after we first take a look here. Now the code is echoed again next to the output as by default the expectation is yes, go ahead and do that. Let's look for that R markdown code chunk. I am going to copy that And I'm going to put it in the very end here. So ref label. No, I still have knitter, so this should still work, even though we're within a Quarto document, Quarto specified document. The markdown process should work. I don't know. Cross your fingers. We're testing something here. We're just out of curiosity, seeing if this will work. Now again, I'm probably going to want to turn that echo off on these because remember what this does is it duplicates. So it's going to take anything above and it's going to repeat it at the bottom. Hey, that's awesome. Now I do have my clipboard, so maybe that was, you know what it is? That's a Quarto document. So that's a difference between a Quarto. Quarto kind of brands itself as publication ready documents. So the Quarto HTML product is giving us this nice clipboard, whereas the RMD product was not giving us that clipboard. So I'm going to set echo false on each of these code chunks. And that's a different specification using the Quarto extension versus the RMarkdown process. So if I do not want these code chunks to first be presented earlier on, then I need to turn off that capability within my document. That's great. That's fantastic. So that's very neat that you can do both of those. You can do both of those within Quarto. We can't apply Quarto to our markdown document. That's because that's kind of looking for backwards compatibility in an essence. So these R markdown packages are still supported. But I think a proper way to look at it is that kind of is more of a legacy capability, and Quarto is Quarto seems a little more forward looking rather than, I don't think they're worried about backward compatibility on things. Okay. I may have explained that poorly because I'm kind of looking at what I've done here and trying to talk to you good people. Let's quit doing that. I don't need to do that anymore. I get one last thing here is my table of contents in terms of headings. I can control it easier using the R markdown process because you literally do go in there and say, this is the level of heading that I want and this is what I want to call it. That is automated through the Quarto extension. So I'm able to control it. So if we were to go to Typist now, I should get the appendix put in my table of contents now because we specified that. We hard coded that. It's in our plain text specification. And there it is. And there's a hyperlink to it. I love it. That's so cool. Look at the wrapping is nice on the Typist. So, and again, Typist just continues to impress me every time I use it or think about using it or just play with it on these weekly sessions. Just the kind of design features and design decisions that have been made just with things like wrapping. It sounds like a minimal thing, but it like I mentioned with the PDF that this is not surprising that we're getting kind of over plotting across the page here with the PDF specification. The Typist does this auto wrapping, so everything is nice and available for you right there. Love it. Okay, neat. I'm glad we checked this out. This is super cool. If there's something that you would like to see on one of these weekly sessions, drop me a note. Let me know. I mentioned Twitter. You can drop me a note on Twitter if you want to see something. Leave a comment to one of these videos. I think I get notifications. When that happens. I know I've gotten some notifications on comments. So otherwise, it's going to be me. I'm going to find something and I'm going to impose it on you good people. All right. Thanks everybody for being here. I will see you next week.